I just want to let you know that I have not seen, like the Academy voting members, I have not seen all of the movies. I've only seen maybe three. So I, today we have a alumnus of the college, a film critic, where you can see his bylines at the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Variety, IndieWire, Carlos Aguilar.
Thank you for having me. Excited to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. As you know, it's the lead up to the end of award season, and you've had a very busy week. I know that you just had the Film Critics Association Awards banquet.
The LA Film Critics Association, yeah.
And then you just had recent bylines for Flo and about Fernando Torres. Can you kind of tell me how your week has been so far and what you've written?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a busy few weeks. This is kind of like the tail end of the war season, and everything got sort of compressed because of the fires. The fires pushed several of these awards that would usually happen in early January. They were pushed, an entire month. And so that, a lot of the industry that's covering award season also goes to the Sundance Film Festival in January. So it's just kind of like an agglomeration of things that happen at once. And so it just becomes like a very busy time for anyone. I've had the chance to cover some of the films that I've been, the most passionate about throughout the last year. Like you mentioned, Flow, the animated film from Latvia, and the Brazilian film I'm Still Here, which, has the wonderful performance by Fernando Torres at its center. And yeah, I'm a freelance journalist, so I always have to pitch these stories. So it's always great when things work out and I get to write about films that I'm very passionate about, which is one of the advantages of being a freelancer, that you kind of, go after the stories that you care about and then hope that that there's a response on the other side. But yeah, it's been a busy last few weeks for sure.
And then I know that you were at the Spear Awards, where Flow won for their animated feature, and it's currently on HBO Max.
Yeah, I mean, Flow won Best International Film at the Spirit Awards. The Spirit Awards don't have an animated category, but Flow, being a Latvian film, was nominated in Best International, and it was the first animated film ever to win in that category, which is kind of incredible. It's a film that has no dialogue, and it follows a group of animals in what it's sort of like a nondescript post-apocalyptic world. It seems like at least this area of the world where these animals live is underwater, it's flooded. And so we follow this cat as he basically discovers what community is. He gets together with a dog and a capybara and a bird and a lemur, and they all go on this journey on kind of like a Noah's Ark type of thing. And they encounter a whale and kind of a pack of dogs that are not as friendly, and sort of it's about their sort of communal collective survival. And again, it's done without dialogue, so these animals behave sort of like animals would, in like an instinctive way. And it's just beautifully done. It's done, I think one of the most impressive things about it is the fact that the filmmaker made this film using an open software, a free software that anyone could use. And so he basically taught himself how to use this software. He had made a previous feature called Away, which he made entirely by himself. And now in Flow, he sort of moved on to working with a team, still a very small team, but now he's working with a team. So he always talks about how the story of the cat going from being by himself to joining this collective of animals is kind of like it mirrors his story of as a filmmaker going from working by himself to now working with a team on Flow. So I just think that the story of it, the making of it, the kind of implication that anyone can do this, it's just very fascinating to me. And he also taught himself how to compose music, even though he doesn't play any instruments. So it's become the source of a national pride in Latvian. So I think that's when you kind of realize the importance or the weight of the significance of the Oscars, the impact they can have in a small country like Latvia that was kind of like not on the map, for I mean, there have been movies from Latvia, but this is really their breakout in terms of international attention.
We first connected when you were out in Sundance. Can you tell me about how that experience was for you and if there are any films that you're excited for people to potentially see?
Yeah, I mean, it was my 10th or 11th Sundance. The first time I attended was in 2014 when I won this fellowship. That they chose a few, emerging film critics back then, and so I've been going every year. Of course, the pandemic, turned the festival into a virtual affair completely. But yeah, it's always an interesting time. It's a very busy festival. It's kind of running around Park City in the snow. But every year there are films that emerge from the competition or the premieres that are just that really make the trip and the kind of the chaos worthwhile. This year, I think one of my favorites is a film called Sorry Baby, uh, which is a first feature about a young woman kind of dealing with the aftermath of sexual assault, but it's done in a way that really straddles the line between comedy and drama. Tonally is a very difficult thing to sort of like handle because clearly the subject matter is horrific and difficult to deal with, but the writer director really their name is Eva Victor. They find a way to tell a story that really straddles levity with the hardship that the character is facing. So I think A24 picked it up, so I feel like that's going to be kind of talked about throughout the year for sure.
You mentioned earlier about how the recent fires here in Los Angeles, in Altadena, and then out in Pacific Palisades have kind of moved the programming of these award celebrations later than they usually are. And I know there was a film that was shown at Sundance called Rebuilding by Max Walker Silverman. Did you get a chance to see that?
Yeah, that's actually one of the ones that I wanted to see the most because I'm a big fan of his first feature, which is called A Love Song, that also premiered at Sundance maybe 2 or 3 years ago when the festival was virtual. So yeah, I got a chance to see it. It's a beautiful, very tender, very quiet film. It stars Josh O'Connor from Challengers and, a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, it's a beautiful film about how this community well quite literally has a choice of either leave entirely and sort of like start their lives somewhere else or try to find a way to rebuild their lives in this area which runs the risk of experiencing fires again. And so it's a very tender film, and just the performances are very quiet and very believable and very human. And so yeah, I think it was also one of the highlights for me. It was definitely one of the films that I was more excited to see, and I think it really delivered. I just think the filmmaker himself has a very yeah, a very nuanced and very delicate way of looking at human relationships and at human drama and tragedy and how we move on from that. And so, yeah, I don't think that one has been picked up or bought for distribution. I would hope that, the fact that Josh O'Connor is sort of like a major name would help it. So, fingers crossed that it will reach a larger audience when it gets released.
Yeah, I saw that too when I was doing the research that no one had bought the film. And I think it's kind of unfortunate given, I guess, the political climate that we're in right now, and especially with how our environment has evolved. I think that being able to showcase a film like that to a wider audience would give people who are not from our state and not from our region a better understanding of what these wildfires can really do, and the kind of destruction and devastation they leave on communities. I mean, it's not just a California issue. We've seen this happen in Texas. We've seen this happen in Hawaii. This movie is based out in Colorado. So it is a national and it's also a global issue. And for those listening, Pasadena City College have been at the forefront in helping our community rebuild. And we do have a community fund that is looking for donations and continues to look for donations. So if you were affected by the Ian fire, and if you need help or if you want more updates about how the college is assisting in those rebuilding, you can go ahead and go to pasadena.edu/fire updates. And with that, we are going to take a short break.
From the calculator to the internet, new technology has always disrupted education. Now, with the rise of ChatGPT, educators are once again evolving. How are educators and students embracing this shift? Read more in the latest edition of Spotlight, available now on campus or at pcccourier.com/spotlight.
Hey, I'm Colin Haskins, managing editor at The Courier. Did you know you can get a weekly roundup of our top stories sent straight to your inbox? It's all in the Courier newsletter. Sign up now at pcccourier.com/newsletter.
This weekend, Sunday is Oscars. Let's talk. Are you excited?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I'm not covering on site this year. I've covered on site for the last maybe 5 or 6 years. I've covered the interview room at the Oscars, which for people that don't know, the interview room is where the winners come out after they've won the Oscar. They come out and talk to the press. You've probably seen clips of people holding the Oscar and answering questions, and most award shows do this. And so that's what I've covered for different outlets over the past few years. I'm not doing that this year, which is kind of means that I get to relax and just watch from afar and maybe tweet or whatever. I'm kind of ready for this season to be over, to talk about new movies and to let the movies of 2024 go.
And then are there any categories that you're kind of personally excited about?
Lead actress for me is, I really am rooting for Fernanda Torres. I think it's a long shot. There's a chance, but I think it's sort of like a long shot. It will be a big surprise if she won, just because, performances by international actresses in languages that are not English have only won twice, I think, in the entire history of the Academy. And so it's very, it's a long shot just because of that. And so I feel like performances like Demi Moore in The Substance and Mikey Madison and Nora are sort of more prominent in the season because they're in bigger movies, and Demi Moore is far more famous than Fernanda Torres and Mikey Madison, at least in the US. And so I'm excited to see if there could be a surprise there, but I'm also not holding my breath. The international category, that one I think could go to Brazil, to the film I'm Still Here. And then animation, I want Flow to win, but I'm also skeptical just because I feel like what Flow winning would mean, for the animation industry. What does it say when what can we sort of think about the industry when this guy from Latvia made this movie on free software? The software is called Blender. He made it with very little money, and it's in the same category as movies that cost $100 million. And so it really would be kind of like a earth-shattering kind of breakthrough for an animated film like this to win. I hope that happens, but I'm skeptical. I feel like they might just go with The Wild Robot or sort of one of the bigger films. So those are the ones that I'm watching closer. With Fernanda Torres, she would be if she were to win, she would be the first actress from Latin America to ever win the award. There have been other nominees, but they've never won, and so it would be also a historic win if she were to take it. And yeah, so those are the ones I'm watching. I'm more invested in because I think that there could be a surprise. There are other categories that seem kind of more done. The winner seems more predictable. But yeah, I don't know which ones you want to talk.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the animated feature film. I know that The Wild Robot is on Peacock right now for people if they want to watch it. And I know a lot of these other films are from, I guess, more major corporations or major film industries. And we did a poll in our newsroom. I wouldn't say that this is eyedropper on what the college community views as the predictions to win the Oscars. But I know a lot of people from our survey are excited for Inside Out too, which I thought was interesting. I watched Flow on Max, and the ending, I'm not going to say the ending for anyone who wants to watch it, but I thought it was very contemplative. I was very confused on exactly what happens. But I think that kind of lends into the fact that there is no dialogue in that film. I think a lot of it is intuitive. It's based on your own interpretations and your own understanding of community and those around you. And you kind of, really investigate yourself and how you interact with other people.
Yeah. I think, I mean, when there's no dialogue and the animals are not explaining themselves and their motivations, then you really get to, kind of infer what you get out of their exchanges and their interactions, because there's no explaining. I think that a lot of American audiences, or Western audiences in general, we've been kind of we're used to thinking of animation as these movies with like a cast of voiced by major actors, and their animals and the characters are always talking, and they're sort of like very energetic, like you think of like the Minions, or any other kind of a major studio film, even something like The Wild Robot, like it's very dialogue heavy, and this is kind of the entire opposite. Really forces you to kind of pay attention to what's happening on screen, because there's no one explaining things to you. So yeah, it's a different experience, but I feel like if people give themselves, to that experience, they could get something out of it. It's funny that you say Inside Out too, because I mean it makes sense, because that's the one that I think made the most money out of the five nominees. So it's likely the most watched out of the five, so that makes sense. Pixar and Disney have dominated this category since it was created back in 2001. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be, I'm not surprised that that's the one that most people have seen. But there's another one nominated called Memoir of a Snail, which is a stop motion movie from Australia, which is it's R-rated. It's not for kids. It really shows that animation can tell any type of story, even sort of more adult ones. And this one is incredibly done. Stop motion personally just fascinates me. The fact that every little thing and every character is physically created, and it has to be moved frame by frame, and so the kind of meticulous and painstaking a job that it entails to move these characters, to bring them to life, it's incredible. So I would recommend people seek it out when if they have a chance to see that one.
Well, to even like expand on what you mentioned about how the director kind of learned a bunch of things on his own to create this movie, I think it kind of encapsulates the idea for a lot of students about higher education and like the different avenues you can take that doesn't have to traditionally take you straight to a 4-year or the typical academic career route that most of us take. There's a lot of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of, I guess, trade skills that you can learn to, I guess, enhance the things that you want to do and find in your life. Are you sad? Well, not sad, but are you disappointed that Challengers didn't get nominated for original score?
Yeah, I love that movie. I love that movie in general. I think it should have been nominated for many categories. Score is great. They also have a song that was nominated, completely was shut out. Yeah, that movie had a weird life. It was originally supposed to come out in 2023, but because of the strikes, they pushed it, and it came out like early in 2024. I think it came out like in March or April of 2024, and so it came out like at a time where like maybe people were still thinking about award season from last year, and even though it did well and the reviews were really good for it, it kind of never came back. It never had like the campaigning and the sort of attention on it. And then the director of the film, Luca Guadagnino, had already a new film. He made the film Queer, they were also pushing for awards. So yeah, I just think it got kind of lost in the shuffle because of the release date that they had to push, and so yeah, I wish they had gotten a better shot of being recognized. But the movie still exists, and the score is still great, and so people can enjoy it. So yeah, I love Challengers.
And then a couple of nights ago, you and I both know that Timothée Chalamet won for A Complete Unknown at the SAG Awards. A lot of people in my newsroom are saying that he's going to win for actor in a leading role, followed by Sebastian Stan in The Apprentice, and then Ralph Fiennes. I think that Adrian Brody has been, for The Brutalist, has been garnering a majority of the awards across the award season so far. I know that I personally want Sebastian Stan to win. I watched that movie a couple nights ago. I thought he was amazing in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sebastian is probably the most kind of daring of all performances just by the nature of who he's, playing. I mean, for people that don't know, he's playing a young Donald Trump in the movie The Apprentice. I just think he had a wonderful year. Sebastian Stan was also in a movie last year called A Different Man, in which he's also really great. I think I like A Different Man more, but I'm glad that he is being recognized for this one. I don't know if he has a good chance. I don't think he's really won anything this season. I think it was a surprise that he was nominated. I think people liked him in the performance, but it wasn't sort of like a unexpected choice. Again, like you said, Adrian Brody has been winning a lot of the awards, but the SAG is a kind of a very telling sign. I mean, the people that vote for SAG are all actors, and many of them are Academy members. So I don't think it's I think it's very possible that Timothée Chalamet could take it. I think it would be in my mind, I think is either Timothée Chalamet or Adrian Brody. I think that's the race, one of the two. I wish I could say that Stan has a better chance, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I honestly wish he did. I think it was amazing. I think that also Jeremy Strong. Jeremy Strong was really good in that also in the supporting role. But going back to Adrian Brody, I know there's a lot of conversations about the use of AI to enhance his accent. Or the way that he dictated some of the words in the film. And I know AI is a huge issue at our school in terms of how students turn in their work, in terms of the bots who are taking up a lot of the seats in our classrooms. What are your thoughts on AI within the industry?
I think it's scary, and I'm definitely not for the use of AI. I do think that it's getting we need to sort of like talk about the nuances, and I think that's where it gets more complicated, right? Because I think that for the brutalist, they use some sort of software that enhance his accent when he's speaking Hungarian, which I think is a very small part of the film. What is technology that helps filmmakers and what is AI? Because CG animation, you use a lot of softwares and you're sort of like using a lot of computer tools, but when do we cross the line from using the tools to sort of the tools doing the work themselves? And I think that that's where it gets complicated. If it's someone still manipulating the software, a human asking the software to do a certain thing, to as opposed to like it's complicated because I also understand the kind of immediate rejection and response to anything AI. Like the moment something is AI, we want to reject it and kind of cancel it and kind of yeah, sort of like denounce it. With the brutalist, I think that the nuance there was kind of lost in terms of like perhaps the person that talked about it wasn't able to explain exactly what they did and how. But yeah, I think it's gonna be sadly the topic of conversation for from here on out. The deciding what is ethical to use, what is not, and how do you sort of like parse between the two.
And then I know that The Brutalist and Honora are kind of in a dead heat to, I guess, take Best Picture from what I've seen. But I think the last thing that I really want to talk about is Zoe Saldana. I know that she basically swept the supporting role categories through this award season so far. I think it's kind of like a given at this point, but who knows? I honestly think that she should have been nominated for her role in the Avatar. Do you remember how that movie was monumental when it first came out? And I don't know how you watch that and you don't think Zozana deserved a nomination. I mean, people wanted to unalive themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that's another kind of thing, of like, because her character was heavily created through CG, clearly based on her facial movement and based on her being physically, acting in front of a green screen, wearing the mocap and whatnot, the technology. That perhaps was a bridge too far for them to consider, her performance as a performance. The same thing people have been talking about, how. Oh my God. The actor who plays Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies, there
yeah.
was an actor who, Andy Serkis, I think is his name. He gave a performance, and but because the performance is sort of like layered with CG and sort of technology and computer generated imagery, he was never nominated or recognized for that award, you know. So yeah, I think that with the same with Zoe Saldana in Avatar, you know, it's like it's hard for people to sort of like see that there is really a performance underneath all the computer generated images.
I wanted to touch back on like the role of a critic because for me, I think that a critic really contextualizes a film and places it within a broader understanding with the history of film, but also from personal experience, from current times, and it kind of asks viewers and readers to expand their understanding of cinema and about film and about the topics that are being presented and really look into it. I mean, how do you see yourself as a critic within the industry and other critics in like I guess in a broader sense like our culture today, because I don't think critics are given the same I guess value as they used to be. I think a lot of people just think like, oh, this person just has an opinion.
There's very few positions now in newspapers and magazines for critics, you know, that are sort of like exclusively being a critic, as opposed to a few decades in the past when that role was like, you know, most newspapers had one or two or more, you know, film critics on staff. Now there's only, you know, maybe the LA Times, the New York Times, and a couple other publications that actually have critics on staff. And so that, you know, the rise of the internet, of course, you know, anyone can have a blog and letterbox, and I think those opinions are also important. You know, I started writing my own opinions on you know, personal blog, so there's definitely not looking down on any of those. It's just that I think what differentiates the critic from the general viewer is the volume of movies that, you know, a critic gets to watch, you know, throughout the year, the kind of a scope of films that, you know, a critic should, you know, watch, you know, from documentaries to international films to animation, blockbusters, Oscar bait, you know. It's really sort of like, I think that's what gives you, if any sort of level of authority, it is the fact that you watch so much that you also, you know, go back and you've watched movies, you know, from the early days of cinema, from other countries, you know, so really building your taste from different sources. That perhaps the main difference between, you know, an opinion of someone that, you know, watches a couple movies a year or that's very much a casual viewer, and a film critic who is invested in the history, invested in, you know, different genres, different, you know, national cinemas, and people have different experiences. You know, what I write about a film set in Mexico or a film about immigration might be different from someone who doesn't have that context, you know. And the same would, you know, what I can write about a movie, you know, centered on like the trans experience is not going to be the same or as insightful as perhaps, you know, a trans critic, a trans writer who can bring, you know, their own personal experiences into that. So yeah, I mean, I think that over the last few years, there's been a boom or a more diligent effort to diversify critical voices, you know, especially in places like, you know, Rotten Tomatoes and, you know, critics associations like LA Film Critics, you know, like the LA Film Critics has a scholarship for community college students, and every year we give out 2 scholarships to aspiring film critics who are studying at a community college in the LA area, and, you know, and those go to underrepresented folks, and Rotten Tomatoes is one of the sponsors of this. And so I always appreciated that the LA Film Critics focuses this scholarship on community college students, because I do feel like when you're at a 4-year and you sort of like made that big step, you know, there's a different set of resources that you have. I think community college still sort of like, you know, seen as less than, you know, by some people, or, you know, it's hard to sort of like make that jump and transfer from community college to a 4-year. And I do think that by encouraging those students with the scholarship, really, you know, an organization that the Other Film Critics is trying to to encourage new voices.
And speaking of college students, I have to run to class. I'm late. But how can listeners see more of your content? I know that you wrote some text for La Bamba Visual History.
I'm usually mostly on X, Twitter, whatever you call it these days. Carlos_film, Carlos Film on Instagram. But yeah, I think the place where I'm the most active is on Twitter/X. So yeah, I'll share all my stories there and random opinions.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on to this Let's Talk podcast. You're an icon, Carlos. The Oscars is premiering on ABC this Sunday for anyone who is interested in seeing how our predictions came out. If you want to see our newsroom predictions, you can go ahead and go into our website at pcccourier.com. Other than that, stay tuned for the rest of our season. Thank you.